testing. Yes! Hello everybody, how are you? Sorry about that. Something's talking to me and it shouldn't be talking to me. I'll just make sure it's got its volume turned down. Oh, sorry. Anyone would think I hadn't done this before. And I think I've said that before too. Right. And I think that's working now. Okay. The sound is working. I can tell because the sound bar is going up and down. So that's good. I can see things on my other monitor, so that's good. If I look a little bit, it's because I've had a headache all day. So we'll just see how we go. Good to have you here. Lovely to have you here, actually. Not just good, but it's lovely to have you here. Now I've got an eyelid ticking. Have you ever had that happen? Where you just get your nerves just do a weird little flicker thingy. I'm so glad it sounds good. Thanks, Grandma. Oh dear, goodness me. For some reason, I was certain I had everything ready, and yet, as you can see, I didn't. And you can hear my mouse and my keyboard clicking. One day I will get a microphone stand that doesn't have my microphone sitting on my keyboard shelf, and therefore it's not going to go thump, thump, thump every time I use my keyboard. So as it is at the moment, I'm using the stand that came with my little blue snowball. Yes, I banged it, so you would have heard that. And I do have a limiter on it, so thankfully it won't get too loud as far as I know. Anyway, so one day I've got an idea in mind for actually making my own stand that's like the bendy arm ones that use springs, except without using springs. It's got longer arms and it has a counterweight or a series of counterweights. I used to have a drafting machine that used counterweights instead of springs, and it's a very effective system if you are prepared to play around with it and get it adjusted right. So that idea, but as a microphone stand, so then when I'm actually in my proper reading space, once I get the storage space behind me sorted out into my reading space and proper office, I will have some bookshelves with books on it, the books that I keep on threatening to dig out of the storage for you, on shelves alongside me, and I've got several chairs that I already have, old chairs of my grandmother's and ones that we've just had in the family for ages and ages. So it's a reading corner, and then I'll be able to have the microphone so I can pull it down and put it where I want it, and the counterweight will hold it in the right position. And it's not going to be where my keyboard is that clacks and thunks. Anyway, one day we can dream, can't we? In the meantime, we've got our thing set up right here, and I'm just adjusting the angle on the microphone, so hopefully it picks me up a bit better. No open captions. That was not clacks and thunks. I have no idea what you thought I was saying. Anyway, right. If you're new here, hi, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories, such as this one here. That was my grandfather's. He was given it when he was... it was given to him in 1890. No, it wasn't given to my grandfather. It was given to my grandmother's brother, older brother. Sorry, I'm having to think about that for a minute. My grandfather's wife, that's why she's my grandmother, one of her older brothers, she was the youngest in a family of 11 children, and he received this one in 1897. And back in those days when books were printed, if they didn't sell all of them, they didn't plan on them all selling straight away like we do now with books. And so they would print them, and they would print enough that they would have them in storage for a while, and they would be selling them for a number of years afterwards, after they'd been printed. So something that was gifted in 1897 may have actually been printed quite a bit earlier than that. I know that I've managed to find that out, the printing date on some other ones that I've had. So this is a book that we are not reading today, but this is along the lines of the sort of thing that I grew up reading from different eras, not the current era that I actually grew up in. I grew up reading my parents' books and my grandparents' books, as well as the ones that were available through the school library and ones that were gifted to me, because books were a big gift item in our family. And so because of that, I felt that having had those experiences, those imaginary experiences that come from so many different generations, and the modern generations don't get the opportunity to experience those books firsthand. Most of them have gone. Most of them have disappeared. Your average local library does not stock those sort of books for you to read. There may be some that are available as ebooks, but most of them are no longer available even through your local library system, because their mandate is to engage people with books that are going to draw them into the habit of reading. And so for most people, because they're the libraries are having to compete with television, movie theatres, and then the extension of that, streaming services, most of the books that they're looking at stocking, the actual physical books that they look at stocking, are actually relatively new or brand new, which is great if you're an author who's current and publishing books, and you manage to develop a good relationship with your local library system, and they want to stock your books and they're available as ebooks or anything like that. But for things that are, for me, valuable, and for other people, but valuable isn't the word I was looking for, things that are from another era, from another time, from another world, so to speak, those are being lost. And so part of the thing for me, part of the importance for me, is to be able to share them so that other people can enjoy them and experience them too. So the one that we're currently reading, Emily of New Moon, and if you're watching this on Twitch, you will see on the overlay up there a copy of the cover of the book. That's the cover I remember. I'm actually reading it as an ebook because I don't know where my copy is of this book. When I say my copy, I'm using that term loosely because it was probably my grandmother's. If it wasn't my grandmother's, then it would have been my mother's and her sister's. But the book that we're currently reading is that one there called Emily of New Moon, written by L.M. Montgomery. That's Lucy Maud Montgomery, a Canadian lady who is famous for having written the Anne of Green Gables series of books, the first one of which is Anne of Green Gables, which is why it's become the series name. So what am I telling you all that for? Probably because I'm trying to help you to understand Yes, I am trying to do something else at the same time. That's the current book we're reading, is Emily of New Moon. It's not as well known outside of Canada as her Anne of Green Gables series, just because it isn't. It's a story I grew up reading. It's familiar, it's comfortable. It's when I was growing up and I was trying to find out a little bit more about the actual book, I discovered that it was one that the author herself felt more sense of connection with than the Anne stories. She had written the first Anne book. It became very, very popular, and then she was put under a lot of pressure by her publishers to keep churning them out, and she did. She did keep churning them out, and then at some stage fairly early on they were actually dramatised, as far as I know, and she wasn't that happy with the dramatisations that were done. so because of that, she decided that she wasn't going to continue to develop that series further, and she got on with the ones that she felt more connected to. She started writing another series, and in her mind, I think there was the possibility that the Emily series would become a lot bigger than it did, but life gets in the way, and so it didn't actually happen. She did write 3 books in the series. There's Emily of New Moon, Emily's Climb, and Emily Climbs, and Emily's Quest. But for our context, I'll just be reading the first book because it's focused on Emily as a schoolgirl, that age group, which is where my reading age focus is junior school, primary school, secondary school, that sort of thing, without being into all sorts of adult contexts and relationship stuff and all the stresses and things like that. Often a little bit younger, usually a little bit more nonsense and mischief going on in the stories, that sort of stuff. So most of my stories that I read are that sort of thing. We'll probably go back to something with a little bit more mischief to it, something like the children in the Samoyed series, or another one of the William books maybe. Children who seem to get themselves into trouble even if they're not intending to. Emily does get into trouble, but not quite as hilariously. But a lot of us feel for her when we're hearing the stories, because of the fact that there are times when she does feel a little picked on. There are times when she feels left out on the fringes. And there's probably an element of that for all of us in our growing up years where we identify with this, and I think that's partly why the way Ms. Montgomery wrote really connects and resonates with a lot of listeners and readers. So enough of the chatter, let's get on with the last part of the intro, which is I have 3 tips for you if you are new here and you haven't been with us before. The tips are for everybody, but I try to remember to tell new listeners. So the 3 tips are: bring something to drink, especially water. It's great for your brain and your body. It keeps you functioning well. I've got water here all the time, but you can have something to drink alongside you as well, but don't leave out the water. So first one is water, second one is snacks. So today I have some pre-sliced cheese, and once again, yay, I'm so proud I've got my green screen working so that it's not turning the cheese into green screen and pretending that it's not there. You think that you have the same lighting set up and surrounding all the time, and yet every time you go to stream you actually end up doing minor adjustments to the light levels and things like that within the streaming program. And the number of times I've held up a piece of yellow cheese and my computer says, no, that's actually green, we're going to pretend it's invisible. It's quite amusing. So something to drink, something to snack on, and preferably somewhere comfortable to sit. Although if you are studying or working, doing housework, whatever, I'm fine with you carrying on. You don't have to sit somewhere comfortable. There will not be a test on whether you have or not. I do not require a signed or sworn affidavit stating that yes, you were sitting in a comfortable seat or anything silly like that. And I'm very, very happy if you are here to listen in the background and just lurk. That's fine. If you wish me, if you're comfortable with me saying hi to you while I'm reading, or before, after, in between chapters, whatever, then you're welcome to state that you are lurking in the chat. I'll point this way because that's where the chat is on the Twitch screen. In which case, to do that, to notify me, put in the exclamation mark and then the word lurk, L-U-R-K, no spaces, no capitals, and the friendly, helpful little bot that it helps with supervising the system here will actually acknowledge that you are lurking, and I will see that at some stage and be able to say hi to you. And I've already said hi to Grandma, I think. I'm pretty sure I did. And thank you for also checking up on the sound for me. Right, we shall carry on with reading Emily of New Moon, and this is chapter 13. Chapter 13 deals with ghosts. Oh my goodness. Hi Cleo. Anyway, well, we will see what this is about. Deals with ghosts. That's intriguing. What do you think is going to happen? Right. Chapter 23, not chapter 13. So it's not quite as as it could have been. Right. Chapter 23 deals with ghosts. Your aunt is in the back parlour, said Caroline Priest. Come this way. Are you tired? Oh, that's right. Emma just remembered where we got up to, because we've had 2 days off. Usually I'm every second day, every third day sort of thing. I read 3 days a week, and then there's a weekend in between, and it's a little easier to forget what we got up to. So Emily has gone to stay with her great aunt. I can't remember her name, but we shall get it very soon. And Caroline is, I think, one of her mother's cousins or something like that, but someone who lives at the house with her aunt, and everybody thinks the aunt's a little bit odd. And they were most surprised that the aunt wanted Emily to come and stay with her. So she's just going and visiting this new to her relative, and we're not sure how long for, or what the purpose of the visit is, or how it's going to go. But apparently the aunt has some money, and that may be why some of the other family members don't wish to upset her in any way. Anyway, we'll get on with the story and find out what's happening. Chapter 23 deals with ghosts. Your aunt is in the back parlour, said Caroline Priest. Come this way. Are you tired? No, said Emily, following Caroline and taking her in thoroughly, assessing what she's like. If Caroline were a witch, she was a very small one, because people have said that Caroline, her aunt's companion or sister or cousin or whatever, is a witch. If she was a witch, she was a very small one. She was really no taller than Emily herself. She wore a black silk dress and a little string cap of black net edged with black ruching on her yellowish-white hair. Her face was more wrinkled than Emily had ever supposed a face could be, and she had the peculiar grey-green eyes which, as Emily afterwards discovered, ran in the Priest clan. You may be a witch, thought Emily, but I think I can manage you. Ooh. They went through the spacious hall, catching glimpses on either side of the large, dim, splendid rooms, then through the kitchen end, out of it, into an odd little back hall. It was long and narrow and dark. On one side was a row of 4 square, small-paned windows. On the other were cupboards, reaching from floor to ceiling, with doors of black, shining wood. Emily felt like one of the heroines in Gothic romance, wandering at midnight through a subterranean dungeon with some unholy guide. She had read the Mysteries of Udolpho and the Romance of the Forest before the taboo had fallen on Dr. Burnley's bookcase. She shivered. It was awful, but interesting. Now, the Mysteries of Udolpho is apparently a real book, and it's referenced in several other books that that I have come across. So one of the books is one of the ones by Georgette Heyer, an English Regency romances, kind of, but her heroines in her books tend to be rather strong-minded and to buck the trend of what was considered to be appropriate behaviour for young women at the time. One of the reasons why I quite enjoy them, because they're not quite so typical. But she has a little bit of a downer on Gothic romance novels that had been around before. So did Jane Austen. She was one of the other ones who I'm pretty certain referenced the Mysteries of Udolpho. And the one about the Abbey. Anyway, one of the Jane Austen ones references this book, and the young lead character in it being so caught up in the idea of gothic romances and terrible things happening in the dark of night and all this sort of stuff. So obviously this particular book she's just referenced, The Mysteries of Udolpho, was quite a thing and rather extremely along those lines. Because there are a number of authors since then who've referenced it, especially talking about it being rather gothic. Anyway, we'll carry on. She had read The Mysteries of Udolpho and The Romance of the Forest before the taboo had fallen on Dr. Burnley's bookcase. Her Aunt Elizabeth had actually forbidden her from reading anything on it because she felt they were inappropriate, and so Dr. Burnley has since locked the doors on his book cabinet. She shivered. It was awful, but interesting. At the end of the hall, a flight of 4 steps led up to a door. Beside the steps was an immense black grandfather's clock, reaching almost to the ceiling. I'm seeing a slight trend with their decorating style here. There's a lot of black. We shut little girls up in that when they're bad, whispered Caroline, nodding at Emily as she opened the door that led into the back parlour. How to keep a young lady under your thumb, under control, threaten with locking up in the clock case. I'll take good care you won't shut me up in it, thought Emily. The back parlour was a pretty, quaint old room where a table was laid for supper. Caroline led Emily through it and knocked at another door, using a quaint old brass door knocker that was fashioned like a Chessy cat, with such an irresistible grin that you wanted to grin too. Chessy, probably based on the same name as the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, which is one of our books we've had before. With such an irresistible grin that you wanted to grin too when you saw it. Somebody said, "Come in," and they went down another 4 steps. Was there ever such a funny house? So many ups and downs of steps. Into a bedroom, and here at last was Great Aunt Nancy Priest, sitting in her armchair with her black stick leaning against her knee and her tiny white hands, still pretty and sparkling with fine rings, lying on her purple silk apron. Purple and black in the Victorian era were signifiers of mourning, especially deep mourning. So technically that was the first year after somebody had died. You went into deep mourning and everything was black, and then if you wanted to soften it slightly, you wore dark purple. And then some people decided that they were going to stay permanently in mourning, especially older widows, and so that became their colour, and it coloured everything about what they did, what they wore, all of that sort of stuff. They got stuck in the past. Anyway, we'll see how Great Aunt Nancy Priest is. See if she's really stuck in the past or if it's just a fashion she likes. So she had her hands that were covered in sparkling fine rings were lying on her purple silk apron. Emily felt a distinct shock of disappointment. After hearing that poem in which Nancy Murray's beauty of nut-brown hair and starry brown eyes and cheek of satin rose had been berhymed, she had somehow expected Great Aunt Nancy, in spite of her 90 years, to be beautiful still. But Aunt Nancy was white-haired and yellow-skinned and wrinkled and shrunken, though her brown eyes were still bright and shrewd. Somehow she looked like an old fairy, an impish, tolerant old fairy who might turn suddenly malevolent if you rubbed her the wrong way. Only fairies never wore long gold-tasselled earrings that almost touched their shoulders, or white lace caps with purple pansies in them. "So this is Juliet's girl," she said, giving Emily one of her sparkling hands. "Don't look so startled, child. I'm not going to kiss you. I never held with inflicting kisses on defenceless creatures simply because they were so unlucky as to be my relatives. Now, who does she look like, Caroline?" Emily made a mental grimace. Now for another ordeal of comparisons, wherein dead and gone noses and eyes and foreheads would be dragged out and fitted on her, but like an identikit picture. She was thoroughly tired of having her looks talked over in every gathering of the clans. "Not much like the Murrays," said Caroline, peering so closely into her face that Emily involuntarily drew back. "Not so handsome as the Murrays." "Nor the Stars either. Her father was a handsome man, so handsome that I'd have run away with him myself if I'd been 50 years younger. There's nothing of Juliet in her that I can see. Juliet was pretty. You are not as good-looking as that picture made you out, but I didn't expect you would be. Pictures and epitaphs are never to be trusted. Where's your bang gone, Emily?" Aunt Elizabeth combed it back, because she had cut her hair into a fringe and then it had been growing back. And then Aunt Elizabeth, who was very upset that she'd done it, had insisted since then on pinning it back so her hair was swept back the whole time instead of having a fringe. "Well, you comb it down again while you're in my house. There's something of your grandfather Murray about your eyebrows. Your grandfather was a handsome man, and a darned bad-tempered one, almost as bad-tempered as the priests. Hey, Caroline?" "If you please, Great-aunt Nancy," said Emily deliberately, "I don't like to be told I look like other people. I look just like myself." Aunt Nancy chuckled. "Spunk, I see. Good. I never cared for meek youngsters. So you're not stupid, eh?" "No, I'm not." Great-aunt Nancy grinned this time. Her false teeth looked uncannily white and young in her old brown face. "Good. If you've brains, it's better than beauty. Brains last. Beauty doesn't. Me, for example. Caroline here now never had either brains nor beauty, had you, Caroline? Come, let's go to supper. Thank goodness, my stomach has stood by me if my good looks haven't." Great-aunt Nancy hobbled, by the aid of her stick, up the steps and over to the table. She sat at one end, Caroline at the other, Emily between, feeling rather uncomfortable. But the ruling passion was still strong in her, and she was already composing a description of them for the blank book, her ruling passion being to write. "I wonder if anybody will be sorry when you die," she thought, looking intently at Caroline's wizened old face. "Come now, tell me," said Aunt Nancy, "if you're not stupid, why did you write me such a stupid letter that first time?" "Lord, but it was stupid. I read it over to Caroline to punish her. I read it over to Caroline to punish her whenever she is naughty." I wonder if Caroline's her daughter. "I couldn't write any other kind of letter because Aunt Elizabeth said she was going to read it." "Trust Elizabeth for that. Well, you can write what you like here and say what you like and do what you like. Nobody will interfere with you or try to bring you up. I asked you for a visit, not for discipline. Though likely you'd have had enough of that at New Moon. You can have the run of the house and pick a beau to your liking from the priest boys. Not that the young fry are what they were in my time." "I don't want a beau," retorted Emily. She felt rather disgusted. Old Kelly had ranted about beaux half the way over, and here was Aunt Nancy beginning on the same unnecessary subject. The word beau, B-E-A-U, or if it's plural, B-E-A-U-X from French. There you go. So beau, B-E-A-U, when you hear it in that context. Just a moment. I just need to check with somebody. Anyway, so carrying on. I don't want a beau. Old Kelly had ranted about beaux half the way over, and here was Aunt Nancy beginning on the same unnecessary subject. "Don't tell me," said Aunt Nancy, laughing till her gold tassels shook. "There never was a Murray of New Moon that didn't like a beau. When I was your age I had half a dozen. All the little boys in Blairwater were fighting about me. Caroline here now never had a beau in her life." Oh dear, are we going to have trouble with Caroline because she's always being put down by Great-aunt Nancy? Never had a beau in her life, had you, Caroline? Never wanted one, snapped Caroline. 80 and 12 say the same thing and both lie. 12 years old, 80 years old. Okay, there you go. So we have a bit of a timeline. We have Emily as being 12 years old in this example, and I would guess Caroline being 80. We'll see how we go. Say the same thing and both lie, said Aunt Nancy. What is the use of being hypocrites among ourselves? I don't say it isn't well enough when men are about. Caroline, do you notice what a pretty hand Emily has? As pretty as mine as when I was young, and an elbow like a cat's. Cousin Susan Murray had an elbow like that. It's odd. She has more Murray points than star points. Yet she looks like the stars and not like the Murrays. What odd sums in addition we all are. The answer is never what you'd expect. Caroline, what a pity Jarback isn't at home. He'd like Emily. I have a feeling he'd like Emily. Jarback's the only priest that'll ever go to heaven, Emily. Let's have a look at your ankles, Puss. Emily, rather unwillingly, put out her foot. Aunt Nancy nodded in satisfaction. Mary Shipley's ankle. Only one in a generation has it. I had it. The Murray ankles are thick. Even your mother's ankles were thick. Look at that instep, Caroline. Emily, you are not a beauty, but if you learn to use your eyes and hands and feet properly, you'll pass for one. The men are easily fooled, and if the women say you're not, 'twill be held for jealousy. If the women say that you're not beautiful, the men will assume that they are jealous. Emily decided that this was a good opportunity to find out something that had puzzled her. Old Mr. Kelly said I had come hither eyes, Aunt Nancy. Have I? And what are come hither eyes? Jock Kelly's an old ass. You haven't come hither eyes. That wouldn't be a Murray tradish. Aunt Nancy laughed. The Murrays have keep your distance eyes, and so have you, though your lashes contradict them a bit. But sometimes eyes like that, combined with certain other points, are quite as effective as come hither eyes. Men go by contraries oftener than not. If you tell them to keep off, they'll come on. My own Nathaniel now, the only way to get him to do anything was to coax him to do the opposite. Remember, Caroline? Have another cookie, Emily. I haven't had one yet, said Emily, rather resentfully. Remind you of anyone? Alice in Wonderland? We've had that book too. Those cookies looked very tempting, and she had been wishing they might be passed. She didn't know why Aunt Nancy and Caroline both laughed. Caroline's laugh was unpleasant, a dry, rusty sort of laugh. No juice in it, Emily decided. She thought she would write in her description that Caroline had a thin, rattling laugh. What do you think of us? Demanded Aunt Nancy. Come now, what do you think of us? Emily was dreadfully embarrassed. She had just been thinking of writing that Aunt Nancy looked withered and shrivelled, but one couldn't say that. One couldn't. Tell the truth and shame the devil, said Aunt Nancy. That isn't a fair question, cried Emily. You think, said Aunt Nancy, grinning, that I'm a hideous old hag and that Caroline isn't quite human. She isn't. She never was. But you should have seen me 70 years ago. I was the handsomest of all the handsome Murrays. The men were mad about me. When I married Nat Priest, his 3 brothers could have cut his throat. One cut his own. Oh, I played havoc in my time. All I regret is that I can't live it over. 'Twas a grand life while it lasted. I queened it over all of them. The women hated me, of course. But all but Caroline here. You worshipped me, didn't you, Caroline? And you worship me yet, don't you, Caroline? Caroline, I wish you didn't have a wart on your nose. I wish you had one on your tongue, said Caroline waspishly. Emily was beginning to feel tired and bewildered. It was interesting, and Aunt Nancy was kind enough in her queer way, but at home Ilse and Perry and Teddy would be foregathering in Lofty John's bush for their evening revel, and Saucy Sal would be sitting on the dairy steps waiting for Cousin Jimmy to give her the froth That's from the milk when he was milking the cows. Emily suddenly realised that she was as homesick for New Moon as she had been for Maywood, her first night at New Moon. "The child's tired," said Aunt Nancy. "Take her to bed, Caroline. Put her in the pink room." Emily followed Caroline through the back hall, through the kitchen, through the front hall, up the stairs, down a long hall, through a long side hall. Where on earth was she being taken? Finally they reached a large room. Caroline set down the lamp and asked Emily if she had a nightgown. "Of course I have. Do you suppose Aunt Elizabeth would have let me come without one?" Emily was quite indignant. "Nancy says you can sleep as long as you like in the morning," said Caroline. "Good night. Nancy and I sleep in the old wing, of course, and the rest of us sleep well in our graves." With this cryptic remark, Caroline trotted out and shut the door. Emily sat down on an embroidered ottoman and looked about her. The window curtains were of faded pink brocade, and the walls were hung with pink paper decorated with diamonds of rose chains. It made a very pretty fairy paper, as Emily found by cocking her eyes at it. She has the ability to defocus her eyes so that a repeating pattern then effectively floats in front of you. That's what they do with those 3D images. But it's something which some people can do a lot more easily than others. And so this is long before those 3D images where you defocus your eyes and see the image in the noisy clutter of markings on the page. And so this is something that obviously the author has experienced herself, and so she shared it as how Emily sees fairy paper. So we'll carry on. There was a green carpet on the floor, so lavishly splashed with big pink roses that Emily was almost afraid to walk on it. She decided that the room was a very splendid one. "But I have to sleep here alone, so I must say my prayers very carefully," she reflected. She undressed rather hastily, blew out the light, and got into bed. She covered herself up to her chin and lay there, staring at the high white ceiling. She had grown so used to Aunt Elizabeth's curtained bed that she felt curiously unsheltered in this low, modern one. But at least the window was wide open. Evidently Aunt Nancy did not share Aunt Elizabeth's horror of the night air. Through it, Emily could see summer fields lying in the magic of a rising yellow moon, but the room was big and ghostly. She felt horribly far away from everybody. She was lonesome, homesick. She thought of old Kelly and his toad ointment. Perhaps he did boil the toads alive after all. This hideous thought tormented her. It was awful to think of toads or anything being boiled alive. She had never slept alone before. Suddenly she was frightened. How the window rattled. It sounded terribly as if somebody or something were trying to get in. She thought of Ilse's ghost, a ghost you couldn't see but could hear and feel. Was something especially spooky in the way of ghosts. She thought of the stone dogs that went "whoa" at midnight. A dog did begin to howl somewhere. Emily felt a cold perspiration on her brow. What had Caroline meant about the rest of them sleeping well in their graves? The floor creaked. Wasn't there somebody or something tiptoeing round outside the door? Didn't something move in the corner? There were mysterious sounds in the long hall. "I won't be scared," said Emily. "I won't think of those things, and tomorrow I'll write down all about how I feel now." And then she did hear something right behind the wall at the head of her bed. There was no mistake about it. It was no imagination. She heard distinctly strange, uncanny rustles, as if stiff silk dresses were rubbing against each other, as if fluttering wings fanned the air, and there were soft, low, muffled sounds like tiny children's cries or moans. They lasted. They kept on. Now and then they would die away, then start up again. Emily cowered under the bedclothes, cold with real terror. Before, her fright had been only on the surface. She had known there was nothing to fear, even while she feared. Something in her braced to endure. But this was no mistake. No imagination. The rustles and flutterings and cries and moans were all too real. Wyther Grange suddenly became a dreadful, uncanny place. Ilse was right. It was haunted. And she was all alone here, with miles of rooms and halls between her and any human beings. It was cruel of Aunt Nancy to put her in a haunted room. Aunt Nancy must have known it was haunted. Cruel old Aunt Nancy, with her ghoulish pride in men who had killed themselves for her. Oh, if she were back in dear New Moon with Aunt Elizabeth beside her. Aunt Elizabeth was not an ideal bedfellow, but she was flesh and blood. And if the windows were hermetically sealed, they kept out spooks as well as night air. Perhaps it won't be so bad if I say my prayers over again, thought Emily, but even this didn't help much. To the end of her life, Emily never forgot that first horrible night at Wyther Grange. She was so tired that sometimes she dozed fitfully off, only to be awakened in a few minutes in panic horror by the rustling and muffled moans behind her bed. Every ghost and groan, every tortured spirit and bleeding nun of the books she had read came into her mind. Aunt Elizabeth was right. Novels aren't fit to be read, she thought. Oh, I will die here of fright. I know I will. I know I'm a coward. I can't be brave. When morning came, the room was bright with sunshine and free from mysterious sounds. Emily got up, dressed, and found her way to the old wing. She was pale, with black-ringed eyes, but resolute. "Well, and how did you sleep?" asked Aunt Nancy graciously. Emily ignored the question. "I want to go home today," she said. Aunt Nancy stared. "Home? Nonsense! Are you such a homesick baby as that?" "I'm not homesick. Not very, but I must go home." "You can't. There's no one here to take you. You don't expect Caroline can drive you to Blair Water, do you?" "Then I will walk." Aunt Nancy thumped her stick angrily on the floor. "You will stay right here until I'm ready for you to go, Miss Puss. I never tolerate any whims but my own. Caroline knows that. Don't you, Caroline? Sit down to your breakfast and eat. Eat!" Aunt Nancy glared at Emily. "I won't stay here," said Emily. "I won't stay another night in that horrible haunted room. It was cruel of you to put me there. Emily gave Aunt Nancy glare for glare. "If I was Salome, I'd ask for your head on a charger." "Hoity-toity, what nonsense is this about a haunted room? We've no ghosts at Wyther Grange, have we, Caroline? We don't consider them hygienic." "You have something dreadful in that room. It rustled and moaned and cried all night long right in the wall behind my bed. I won't stay. I won't." Emily's tears came in spite of her efforts to repress them. She was so unstrung nervously that she couldn't help crying. It lacked but little of hysterics with her already. Aunt Nancy looked at Caroline, and Caroline looked back at Aunt Nancy. "We should have told her, Caroline. It's all our fault. I clean forgot. It's so long since anyone slept in the pink room. No wonder she was frightened. Emily, you poor child. It was a shame. It would serve me right to have my head on a charger, you vindictive scrap." "We should have told you." "Told me? What?" "About the swallows in the chimney." "That was what you heard. The big central chimney goes right up through the walls behind your bed. It is never used now since the fireplaces were built in." That means closed up, I think. "The swallows nest there, hundreds of them. They do make an uncanny noise, fluttering and quarrelling as they do." Emily felt foolish and ashamed, much more ashamed than she needed to feel, for her experience had really been a very trying one, and older folks than she had been woefully frightened in the night in the pink room at Wyther Grange. Nancy Priest had put people into that room sometimes expressly to scare them, but to do her justice, she really had forgotten in Emily's case, and was sorry. Emily said no more about going home. Caroline and Aunt Nancy were both very kind to her that day. She had a good nap in the afternoon, and when the second night came, she went straight into the pink room and slept soundly the night through. The rustles and cries were as distinct as ever, but swallows and spectres were two entirely different things. "After all, I think I'll like Wyther Grange," said Emily. And that's the end of that chapter. Goodness me! Oh, did you guess that that was what was going to happen? Deals with ghosts, that was that one. Oh my goodness, I had not figured that that was what the cause was. I hadn't remembered either. I have actually read this book, but it was a very long time ago. Sorry, I'm thirsty. Now, because it is a chapter break, now's your opportunity to write in the chat box if there's anything that you want me to get into chat with you about. And if you really, really need to, rush off and get your drink that you might have forgotten before, because I said, drink and snacks. So now's your opportunity to go and grab them. Go to the loo while you can, all that sort of thing. Sorry, and I'm just... okay, right. So how's it where you are at the moment? We've got a long weekend because today is Monday the 25th of April. And Monday the 25th of April in New Zealand, well, the 25th of April is Anzac Day. Anzac Day is a day commemorating the Australia and New Zealand Army Corps who landed on the beach in what's now Turkey for part of the First World War, and a lot of them were killed fighting against the Turkish people. The idea was that the Allies, that's the British and other forces of that sort, were trying to make sure that the land through that area could not be a corridor for, I think it was the Russians, to come down into the Mediterranean and hassle the rest of Europe, and disrupt things and become united with the Germans. I would guess, I don't remember well because it's so long ago since I learned about it. Anyway, so there were a lot of them died on the beach, or the beaches actually, there. It's now called Anzac Cove, and the Turkish people have honoured them, even though they fought against them, have honoured them. They have made a whole section there, a memorial. They honour them every year on this day, and we use that as a lot of other English-speaking countries like the States and England have Memorial Day, which is, I think, the same date as what they used to call Armistice Day, which was the end of the signing of the armistice at the end of the First World War, as a commemoration for fallen soldiers, but also those who have served anyway as soldiers, whether they survived or not. But in Australia and New Zealand, we're aware of that day. We do sort of commemorate it, but for us as nations, Anzac Day is our really big military memorial day. So that's the day that we have as set aside for remembering those who've served initially in the First World War, but then also the Second World War and any other theatres of war since then, whether it's in modern situations or the earlier historic ones. And we have dawn services, dawn parades, we have ones during the middle of the day and things like that as well. The Return Services Association, the RSA, have they put on a special series of parades. They will often have veterans get to have they get honoured, but they also will have meals provided at the RSA, which is like a club rooms for military people currently serving and also past serving. So That's all part of it. It's actually something that's worth having a look into if you're not from our background, and the Australian New Zealand background, to actually find out a little bit more about Anzac Day. Keeping in mind that most of the information you'll come across will be written from an Australian perspective, because there are a lot more Australians than New Zealanders, and they tend to be a lot more vocal about things that are important to them than what New Zealanders are. So, but yeah, look it up if you're interested. ANZAC, Australia New Zealand Army Corps, is I think what it stands for. And because of their sacrifice in the First World War, and the attitude of the Turkish people and what became then afterwards the Turkish government towards our people, we can arrive in, we don't have to get, I don't know about the Australians, but New Zealanders can arrive in Turkey without a visitor's visa, without a visitor's permit, just arrive on your New Zealand passport, well, up until before COVID stopped travel, and you could hand over your passport and say you were there as a visitor, and they would let you in, just like that. You didn't have to apply beforehand to be visiting, whereas most of the other countries I know of actually, and unless you're in a trade association with Turkey, actually had to be make an application for a visitor's permit. New Zealanders don't. They really honour us, even though we fought against them on their own country. And I think it's just because of the fact that our people died there on their land. They actually stated that we treat the memory of your sons, because it was young men, we treat the memory of your sons who died here in this place as we treat our own. We honour them. They are always part of us, even though they are also part of you. And it's something that's quite outstanding. My daughter actually did a work trip to Turkey for work purposes. There was a big conference that they had in Istanbul a number of years ago now, and it was the business she worked for is global, and there were representatives from all around the country. She was a junior. She won a position to go on this trip. It was honouring people who actually had done well for the business, and and they were in Istanbul, staying at this fairly high level hotel, and the organisation, the company that she worked for, actually booked X number of rooms for this many people and that sort of stuff. And she was put into, they have a presidential suite, which when it's a full booking for that is one large suite. But if they don't have a booking for the presidential suite, they'll split it into two mini suites. And my daughter was put into one half of the presidential suite and given preferential treatment by the staff because she was from New Zealand. She hadn't realised how preferential her treatment was until she was talking with the Australians, who also got fairly good treatment compared with the Americans and the English and the French and the Japanese and the whoever else there was there. I can't remember. There was a lot of them. She had just assumed that all the others were getting these special little gifts of fruit and everything, fresh strawberries on a plant, but with the fruit still live on the plant, dipped in chocolate on the end of it, freshly picked Turkish apricots, perfectly ripe, all these things. Each morning she had something fresh that was left for her in her room, and she just thought that everybody else was getting this too. And then she was talking to some of the other people on the occasion, and she was a junior, and they said, "No, what are you talking about? Fruit in your room that you can have whenever you want it." And it turns out it was because she was an eater, she was from New Zealand, and so they were just honouring her because she was a New Zealander, which was just such a delight that she actually had this opportunity. She also got on, because she recognised that they were actually taking care of her, she actually made a point of getting to know the staff members and spending time talking with them and seeing what life was like for them and working there and so on. Just unusual opportunities, and sometimes you get unusual opportunities. And And it can be quite mind-blowing when they happen like that. It was definitely not something that she was expecting. And the fact that none of the others were getting the same treatment, even though, some of the seniors from the company might have been getting some of these things as special treatment for them, but she was not one of the seniors. She was only with the company for a year and a half at this stage. So technically not the sort of thing that would happen. And yet it was the staff of the hotel who were providing this for her. It was nothing to do with the company that she was over there with that part of the treatment was happening. Anyway, so it's wonderful. It's intriguing, just the opportunities for different things that happen. It really is wonderful. The great thing about learning and interacting with different cultures, it absolutely is. So I'm just going to put the name of the organisation, the body again. So I was going to say celebration, commemoration day for us is Anzac Day. It's been Mondayised, so we actually still recognise it as being an important day, the 25th of April. But in terms of a public holiday, the day that we actually don't go to work because it's that important to us, and the day that we will have our dawn services and our midday services, that will be on the Monday that's nearest to the 25th of April. So anyway, that's why I just spelled it in there for you, and it's always spelled with capital letters because it is an acronym. Just in case you want to find out a little bit more about it, it's always intrigued me that the Turkish people and government have honoured New Zealand, Australians and New Zealanders, but especially New Zealanders, so much, considering that they were on opposing sides at that time. Anyway, enough of that. I shall have my drink of water, and I shall get my snacky cheese ready, even though I'm not actually quite ready to eat it at the moment. And then we shall read the next chapter, and the next chapter is chapter 24. 24. And for some reason I'm having less trouble with remembering that it's 20 instead of 10 for this one. Maybe because the chapter title doesn't have the word ghosts in it. So 13 made more sense when it was to do with ghosts. I don't know. That's intriguing. Right, so chapter 24, Emily of New Moon by L.M. Montgomery. Chapter 24, A Different Kind of Happiness. And I'm thinking that this chapter is going to be letters to father, and maybe some poems, observations, that sort of thing. Because Emily has a tendency to sit and just write to get some of her, how she feels about things out of her system. A Different Kind of Happiness, July 20th. Dear Father, I have been a fortnight at Wyther Grange, and I have not written to you once, but I thought of you every day. I had to write to Aunt Laura and Ilse and Teddy and Cousin Jimmy and Perry, and between times I am having such fun. The first night I was here I did not think I was going to be happy, but I am, only it's a different kind of from New Moon happiness. Aunt Nancy and Caroline are very good to me and let me do exactly as I like. This is very agreeable. They are very sarcastic to each other, but I think they are a good bit like Ilse and me. They fight quite frequently, but love each other very hard between times. I am sure Caroline isn't a witch, but I wouldn't like to know what she thinks of when she is all alone by herself. Aunt Nancy is not pretty any longer, but she is very aristocratic looking. She doesn't walk much because of her rheumatism. That's odd spelling. Her spelling generally has improved, but rheumatism is spelt rheum and then atism. Instead of R-H-E-U-M, it's R-O-O-M. Makes sense if you haven't seen it written down to write it that way. She doesn't walk much because of her rheumatism, so she sits mostly in her back parlour and reads and knits lace or plays cards with Caroline. I talk to her a great deal because she says it amuses her, and I have told her a great many things, but I have never told her that I wrote poetry. If I did, I know she would make me recite it to her, and I feel she is not the right person to recite your poetry to. I think she refers to it as your poetry, as in her father's poetry, because she writes it for him. And I do not talk about you or mother to her, though she tries to make me. I told her all about Lofty John and his bush and going to Father Cassidy. She chuckled over that and said she always liked to talk to the Catholic priests because they were the only men in the world a woman could talk to for more than 10 minutes without other women saying she was throwing herself at their heads. In other words, flirting. Aunt Nancy says a great many things like that. She and Caroline talk a great deal to each other about things that happened in the Priest and Murray families. I like to sit and listen. They don't stop just as things are getting interesting the way Aunt Elizabeth and Aunt Laura do. A good many things I don't understand, but I will remember them and will find out about them sometime. I have written descriptions of Aunt Nancy and Caroline in my Jimmy book. That's the book she got from Uncle Jimmy. I keep the book hidden behind the wardrobe in my room because I found Caroline rummaging in my trunk one day. I must not call Aunt Nancy great aunt. She says it makes her feel like Methuselah. She tells me all about the men who were in love with her. It seems to me they all behaved pretty much the same. I don't think that was exciting, but she says it was. She tells me about all the parties and dances they used to have here long ago. Wyther Grange is bigger than New Moon, and the furniture is much handsomer, but it is harder to feel acquainted with it. There are many interesting things in this house. I love to look at them. There is a Jacobite glass on a stand in the parlour. It was a glass an old ancestor of the priests had long ago in Scotland, and it has a thistle and a rose on it, and they used it to drink Prince Charlie's health with, and for no other purpose. When you propose a toast, in the old days you used to propose a toast to the reigning royal. And so if you were a Jacobite, that means a supporter of James I of England, James the 6th, 5th of Scotland. I think that's who the Jacobites were. You would propose a toast to the Scottish king. If you were Scottish, or if you were supporting the Jacobite side of the battles that were going on in England and Scotland at the time. Prince Charlie. The Jacobites were the ones who were descended from that side of the family, the royal family. And so they only would use this glass for proposing a toast to Prince Charlie. This is not our Charlie, this is long back. Charles the First, the one who ended up being beheaded or something. It is a very valuable heirloom, and Aunt Nancy prizes it highly, and she has a pickled snake in a big glass jar in the china cabinet. It is hideous but fascinating. I shiver when I see it, yet I go to look at it every day. Something seems to drag me to it. Aunt Nancy has a bureau in her room with glass knobs and a vase shaped like a green fish sitting up on end, and a Chinese dragon with a curly tail, and a glass of sweet little stuffed hummingbirds, and a sand glass for boiling eggs by, and a framed wreath made out of the hair of all the dead priests, and lots of old daguerreotypes. That's a type of old photograph. But the thing I like the best of all is a great silvery shining ball hanging from the lamp in the parlour. It reflects everything like a little fairy world. Aunt Nancy calls it a gazing ball, and she says that when she is dead I am to have it. I wish she hadn't said that, because I want the ball so much that I can't help wondering when she will die, and that makes me feel wicked. I am to have the Chessy cat door knocker and her gold earrings too. These are Murray heirlooms. Aunt Nancy says the priest heirlooms must go to the priests. I will like the Chessy cat, but I don't want the earrings. I'd rather not have people notice my ears, because it's referred to as her having elfin ears, slightly pointed ears, just the way that the outer end of them is shaped. I'm just going to see if a gazing ball is an actual thing. It is too. Did you know that? Ha! I didn't. Never come across them before, apart from in this story. Gazing ball. Let's see if I can find something else that says Here you go. Also known as a yard globe. Never heard of that before either. Gazing balls originated in 13th century Venice, Italy, where they were hand-blown by skilled craftsmen. There you go. A yard globe, also known as a garden globe, gazing ball, lawn ball, garden ball, gazing globe, mirror ball, chrome ball, or orb, is a mirrored sphere typically displayed atop a conical ceramic or wrought iron stand, and sometimes the grass, as a lawn ornament. Sizes range from 1 inch up to 10 metres. That's 25 millimetres up to 33 feet. I don't know why they went from imperial to metric and then metric to imperial. Why not just use 1 inch to 33 feet, or in brackets 25 millimetres to 10 metres? That's really strange. In diameter, with the most popular gazing ball being about 12 inches or 300 millimetres across. Gazing balls were glass but can now be stainless steel, acrylic, ceramic or stained glass. Unlike hanging friendship balls or witch balls that have a loop, gazing balls come in a variety, with some having a stem so they can securely sit in a stand, while others are more uniform in shape and can sit on grass. Larger sizes can be made but prove difficult to place on the stand due to the weight of the globe, especially if they're made out of glass. Right. Let's see, we will go back and find a picture that is worth sharing. A gazing ball. No, that wasn't what I wanted. Images. Here we go. So this one is actually set inside the house. It hangs in the house, but traditionally they have been on stands. I like some of the modern pictures of them, actually. I'm trying to find something that looks more traditional in a garden setting so that you can see the type of use. Yes, it is relevant for the story in some way because Emily is so taken by it. Save image. And no, I don't actually read the story ahead of time. So anything like this is stuff that just comes up as we're reading, which is why you get these random pauses while I'm reading to you. No, I think this one's going to work better. Now I just need to put it in here for you so you can see specific books, finding the right folder for you. Thanks, Jonathan. It's lovely to be able to share all sorts of random as stuff. And I'm looking over the top of my book. There you go. So, nope, wrong way. That's a gazing ball on a stand. It's like a the base of a bird bath, but without the bath part. In the garden, the way the description that we had just before, not from the book, but from Wikipedia, was talking about. So it reflects everything that you have around you. The one that Emily is talking about in the house is actually hanging underneath a light fitting. And I'm going to leave that behind me while I read. For now. But the thing I like the best of all is a great silvery shining ball hanging from the lamp in the parlour. I'm not quite sure. I'm guessing the way it was made, it had a hook made in the form as part of the glass to make it strong enough. Anyway, carrying on. hanging from the lamp in the parlour. It reflects everything like a little fairy world. Aunt Nancy calls it a gazing ball and says that when she is dead I am to have it. I wish she hadn't said that, because I want the ball so much that I can't help wondering when she will die, and that makes me feel wicked. I am to have the Chessy cat door knocker and her gold earrings too. That's right, Emily said that she didn't want the earrings, but she wanted the cat. I'm seeing if a Chessy cat... Oh, okay. Right. Not something I expected to see lots of, but there are. And they all refer to them as Cheshire cat of some sort. And I'm going to find one of those that I can show you as well. Chessy cat door knocker. How unexpected. Sorry, I just totally did not expect to see a real thing like that. Here we go. Find the next one. Picture, browse. Why do you keep taking me to the wrong folder? You should be using the folder I'm already using. Sometimes computers don't make sense. And here's the other picture, the Chessy cat door knocker, and I will make it a little bit smaller so you can see it properly. See? So there's the face of the cat, and this is like a collar or a bow that comes around it here. Trying to draw because I'm not used to that from that angle. So there you go. So that's the other thing, and she's thinking that she wouldn't mind having that. I am to have the Chessy cat door knocker and her gold earrings too. These are Murray heirlooms. Aunt Nancy says the priest heirlooms must go to the priests, because that's the other side of the family that she married into. I will like the Chessy cat, but I don't want the earrings. I'd rather not have people notice my ears. I have to sleep alone. I feel frightened, but I think if I could get over being frightened, I'd like it. I don't mind the swallows now. It's just being alone so far away from anyone, because she's so used to sharing the bed with Aunt Elizabeth. But it is lovely to be able to stretch out your legs just as you like and not having anybody scold you for squirming. And when I wake up in the night and think of a splendid line of poetry, because the things that you think of like that always seem the best, I can get right out of bed and write it right down in my Jimmy book. Pardon me. I couldn't do that at home, and then by morning I'd likely forget it. I thought of such a nice line last night. Lilies lifted pearly chalices. A chalice is a kind of cup, only more poetical. You don't want to know how she spelled it. Lilies lifted pearly chalices where bees were drowned in sweetness. And I felt happy because I was sure they were 2 better lines than any I had composed yet. I am allowed to go into the kitchen and help Caroline cook. Caroline is a good cook, but sometimes she makes a mistake, and this vexes Aunt Nancy because she likes nice things to eat. The other day, Caroline made the barley soup far too thick, and when Aunt Nancy looked at her plate, she said, "Lord, is this a dinner or a poultice?" Caroline said, "It is good enough for a priest, and what is good enough for a priest is good enough for a Murray." And Aunt Nancy said, "Woman, the priests eat of the crumbs that fall from the Murray tables." And Caroline was so mad she cried, and Aunt Nancy said to me, "Emily, never marry a priest," just like old Kelly, when I have no notion of marrying one of them. I don't like any of them I've seen very much, but they seem to me a good deal like other people. Jim is the best of them, but impudent. Okay, just backing up slightly, a poultice. A poultice is a paste that you make of something to put on an injured piece of skin or body for when it's bone underneath, or when there's swelling or something like that. You use various things. There's bread poultices, there are onion poultices, there are potato poultices, there are different herbal leaf poultices, and you just put it over the area. And sometimes I think it's the warmth of what you're putting on, sometimes it's actually the different vitamins and minerals and chemicals that are in the object that has been put on the surface. And then you leave it wrapped up, holding the poultice on there, and then for a certain amount of time, usually a day or overnight or something like that, and then you swap it for another one and you keep changing it. And often if there has been an infection there, it will draw the infection out. The heat will irritate the surrounding area enough that the body will push the infection to the surface and into the material of the poultice. Anyway, but a poultice is often rather gooey or thick, so it will sit gluggy on the surface of whatever has been damaged, such as on a hand or something like that. You put it on there and you leave it on there. So that's why Aunt Nancy was saying, is this a meal or a poultice? Is this dinner or a poultice? Anyway, I'll carry on. I like the Wyther Grange breakfasts better than the New Moon breakfasts. We have toast and bacon and marmalade, nicer than porridge. Sunday is more amusing here than at New Moon. Sorry, I'm just trying to see past my book. Than at New Moon, but not so holy. Nice for a change. Aunt Nancy can't go to church or knit lace, so she and Caroline play cards all day. So Aunt Nancy isn't able to go to church, but because it's a Sunday, she doesn't knit lace, because obviously she sees knitting lace as kind of work, I suppose. We'll carry on. I've referenced this before. It's not uncommon in different places to have anything that is to do with work as being forbidden on a holy day, whether it's a Sunday or a Sabbath Saturday, depending on the culture that the person is from, or even if it's a specific holy day during the year. Right, carrying on. Aunt Nancy can't go to church or knit lace, so she and Caroline play cards all day, but she says I must never do it, that she is a bad example. I love to look at Aunt Nancy's big Parlor Bible because there are so many interesting things in it. Pieces of dresses and hair and poetry and old tin types, that's another type of photograph print, and accounts of deaths and weddings. I found a piece about my own birth and it gave me a queer feeling. In the afternoon, some of the priests come to see Aunt Nancy and stay to supper. Leslie Priest always comes. He is Aunt Nancy's favourite nephew, so Jim says. I think that is because he pays her compliments, but I saw him wink at Isaac Priest once when he paid her one. I don't like him. He treats me as if I were a mere child. Aunt Nancy says terrible things to them all, but they just laugh. When they go away, Aunt Nancy makes fun of them to Caroline. Caroline doesn't like it because she's a priest, and so she and Aunt Nancy always quarrel on Sunday evening and don't speak again until Monday morning. I can read all the books in Aunt Nancy's bookcase except the row on the top shelf. I wonder why I can't read them. Aunt Nancy said they were French novels, but I just peeped into one and it was English. I wonder if Aunt Nancy tells lies. Maybe more because the type of content was referred to as a French novel. I don't know. Inappropriate for a child. Probably. The place I love best is down at Bay Shore. Some parts of the shore are very steep and there are such nice woodsy unexpected places all along it. I wander there and compose poetry. I miss Ilse and Teddy and Perry and Saucy Sal a great deal. I had a letter from Ilse today. She wrote me that they couldn't do anything more about the Midsummer Night's Dream till I got back. It is nice to feel so necessary. Aunt Nancy doesn't like Aunt Elizabeth. She called her a tyrant one day, and then she said Jim Murray was a clever boy. Elizabeth Murray killed his intellect and her temper, and nothing was done to her. If she had killed his body, she would have been a murderess. The other was worse, if you ask me. I do not like Aunt Elizabeth at times myself, but I felt, dear father, that I must stand up for my family, and I said, I do not want to hear such things said of my Aunt Elizabeth. And I just gave Aunt Nancy a look. She said, well, saucebox, my brother Archibald will never be dead as long as you're alive. If you don't want to hear things, don't hang around when Caroline and I are talking. I notice there are plenty of things you like to hear. So, Archibald, that's Aunt Elizabeth's father, was her brother, Aunt Nancy's brother. There you go. I notice there are plenty of things you like to hear. That was sarcasm, dear father, but still I feel Aunt Nancy likes me, but perhaps she will not like me very long. Jim Priest says she is fickle and never liked anyone, even her husband, very long. But after she has been sarcastic to me, she always tells Caroline to give me a piece of pie, so I don't mind the sarcasm. She lets me have real tea too. I like it. At a new moon, Aunt Elizabeth won't give me anything but cambric tea because it is best for my health. I'm not sure about cambric tea. I'm aware of chamomile tea, and cambric I thought was a fabric. So maybe she means chamomile tea. It was a mild tea that was given to children, and it's also very good for helping people to sleep. Anyway, cambric tea, we'll just accept it as is, and you can look it up if you want. Aunt Elizabeth won't give me anything but cambric tea because it's best for my health. Aunt Nancy says the way to be healthy is to eat just what you want and never think about your stomach. But then she was never threatened with consumption. She says I needn't be a bit frightened of dying of consumption because I have too much ginger in me. That is a comforting thought. The only time I don't like Aunt Nancy is when she begins talking about the different parts of me and the effect they will have on the men. It makes me feel so silly. I will write you oftener after this, dear father. I feel I have been neglecting you. P.S. I'm afraid there are some mistakes in spelling in this letter. I forgot to bring my dictionary with me. July 22nd. Oh, dear father, I am in a dreadful scrape. I don't know what I am to do. Oh, father, I have broken Aunt Nancy's Jacobite glass. It seems to me like a dreadful dream. I went into the parlour today to look at the pickled snake, and just as I was turning away, my sleeve caught the Jacobite glass, and over it went on the hearth and shivered into fragments. At first I rushed out and left them there, but afterwards I went back and carefully gathered them up and hid them in a box behind the sofa. Aunt Nancy never goes into the parlour now, and Caroline not very often, and perhaps they may not miss the glass until I go home. But it haunts me. I keep thinking of it all the time, and I cannot enjoy anything. I know Aunt Nancy will be furious and never forgive me if she finds out. I could not sleep all night for worrying about it. Jim Priest came down to play with me today, but he said there was no fun in me and went home. The priests mostly say what they think. Of course, there was no fun in me. How could there be? I wonder if it would do any good to pray about it. I don't feel as if it would be right to pray because I am deceiving Aunt Nancy. July 24th. Dear father, this is a very strange world. Nothing ever turns out just like what you expect. Last night I couldn't sleep again. I was so worried. I thought I was a coward and doing an underhand thing and not living up to my traditions. At last it got so bad I couldn't stand it. I can bear it when other people have a bad opinion of me, but it hurts too much when I have a bad opinion of myself. So I got out of bed and went right back through all those halls to the back parlour. Aunt Nancy was still there, all alone, playing solitaire. She said, what on earth was I out of bed for at such an hour? I just said, short and quick, to get the worst over. I broke your Jacobite glass yesterday and hid the pieces behind the sofa. Then I waited for the storm to burst. Aunt Nancy said, what a blessing. I've often wanted to smash it, but never had the courage. All the Priest clan are waiting for me to die to get that glass and quarrel over it, and I am tickled to think none of them can have it now, and yet can't pick a fuss with me over smashing it. Get off to bed and get your beauty sleep, I said. And aren't you mad at all, Aunt Nancy? If it had been a Murray heirloom, I'd have torn up the turf. But Aunt Nancy said, but I don't care a hoot about the priest things. So I went back to bed, dear father, and felt very relieved, but not so heroic. I had a letter from Ilse today. She says Saucy Sal has had kittens at last. I feel that I ought to be home to see about them. Likely Aunt Elizabeth will have them all drowned before I get back. I had a letter from Teddy too, not much of a letter, but all filled with dear little pictures of Ilse and Perry and the tansy patch and Lofty John's bush. The tansy patch is where Teddy lives. And Lofty John's bush. They made me feel homesick. July 28th. Oh, Father dear, I have found out all about the mystery of Ilse's mother. It is so terrible. I can't write it down even to you. I cannot believe it. But Aunt Nancy says it's true. I did not think there could be such terrible things in the world. No, I can't believe it, and I won't believe it. No matter who says it's true, I know Ilse's mother couldn't have done anything like that. There must have been a fearful mistake somewhere. I am so unhappy and feel as if I could never be happy any more. Last night I wept into my pillow, like the heroines in Aunt Nancy's books do. And that's the end of the chapter. And it's also the end of today's reading. So there you go. All sorts of things happened. The next chapter is a quotation. She couldn't have done it. I wonder if that's to do with Ilse's mother. Maybe that's a mystery that Emily is going to sort out. Oh my goodness, so many possibilities. So today's Monday. The next day that I plan to be reading is Wednesday, so that's 2 days from now at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on New Zealand time, and I expect to see you then. So don't forget, come along with your water, your snacks, your comfortable seat, ready to have a listen and find out a little bit more about what's been going on in Emily's world. So in the meantime, have a great week, the next part of it, and happy reading. Bye.